Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The Leader of the House of Commons has ordered an independent inquiry into allegations of bullying of staff by MPs after an investigation by this programme. In one of the more uncomfortable sessions for the House, the Speaker, John Bercow, one of those MPs named in our investigation, presided over today's proceedings. Andrea Leadsom said the reports of bullying were of huge concern and that a short inquiry would assess whether current procedures to protect people who work for the Commons were fit for purpose. Ms Leadsom chose not to address a question on Mr Bercow's future, but insisted bullying must be stamped out wherever it's seen. Chris Cook and his producer, Lucinda Day, broke the story for Newsnight, and here is Chris on the latest.
Last week, Newsnight revealed a problem in Westminster, an issue with the so-called clerks, the apolitical workforce who make the House of Commons tick. They say they face bullying and harassment by MPs, and serving clerks don't trust management processes to protect them. In large part because, in serious cases, MPs can be involved in judging one another.
Management have told us to report stuff, but I think if I raised something, I'd be moved. In all my time here, I haven't seen one case go against a member.
The response we got from the Commons authorities was pretty dismissive. For example, we told you about how one serving clerk had told us that she felt she lived in a culture of fear. The House authorities said that was a grotesque exaggeration. Today, though, we reported on a new development. This morning, we got hold of a letter from David Nartzler, the clerk of the House of Commons, completely changing his position. This letter was sent out to the House of Commons clerks.
Some of you have expressed to me and to others your dismay at the tone of our statement to Newsnight and the subsequent email that we sent to you on Friday morning. I acknowledge we got it wrong in giving the impression we were in denial. There is no doubt in my mind there are unresolved issues over bullying and harassment which need to be addressed. The public testimony of colleagues confirms that.
The senior management of the House are acknowledging they got the tone of their response to Newsnight's reporting last week wrong. They're acknowledging that there is a problem with bullying and harassment in the House of Commons and that the policy that's in place to deal with that isn't adequate and that it needs to be looked at again.
The letter was seen as a step forwards, but we gathered testimony revealing continuing concerns among serving clerks.
He makes no apology or commitment to victims of historic harassment that their cases will be re-examined using any new improved respect policy. I don't think the House should get to decide that this is year zero, especially as the House's mishandling of harassment cases and a toxic culture from management was a big part of the problem.
I have every reason to believe he is sincere. The problem is that, however elevated his position, David Nartzler neither has the power to ensure that all allegations of bullying and harassment are dealt with independently and impartially, nor does he have the ability to ensure that appropriate sanctions are imposed on the small number of members who mistreat staff.
The people who have that power are MPs. They met today to discuss our reporting. We revealed last week that John Bercow is accused of bullying. He denies it, and he chaired today's session.
The House Commission next meets on Monday the 19th of March, next Monday, and I have given notice to my fellow members that I will be recommending a short, independently led inquiry by the House Commission looking into allegations of systemic bullying of parliamentary staff. I will propose that the inquiry should hear from past and current staff members about their experiences and help to provide them with closure wherever possible.
It's not clear whether this inquiry will name troublesome MPs or just discuss culture. That will be for the House of Commons Commission to decide next week. A panel chaired by John Bercow. Some MPs today were concerned about overreaction. Here's Paul Farrelly, who denied allegations of bullying last week.
Honourable members, before they jump to judgment after what was a very one-sided, selective BBC broadcast, that they approach the cases that have been raised in a more balanced way.
A consensus has emerged that something must be done, and the inquiry should help decide what. Clerks will not be left out of efforts to reform Westminster. But one thing's clear. Any system where MPs still make decisions on sanctioning MPs will not have the support of staff.
That was Chris Cook, and I'm joined now by the MP Caroline Lucas, co-leader of the Green Party, and of course the MP who tabled the urgent question that led to Andrea Leadsom's statement. Caroline, did it go the way you hoped?
There was a change of tone, and that was welcome. So we had a change from criticising the complaints as being a grotesque exaggeration. That was positive. We had a recognition that the new procedures, which are more independent than the old respect policy, will be expanded to include all staff very shortly, so that's good. But where it still fell short was still the lack of real grappling with the fact that the whole process from start to finish has to be independent. And so this new inquiry that Andrea Leadsom just mentioned is proposed to be undertaken by the House of Commons Commission. In other words, another set of MPs. And if this whole saga has told us anything, it is that you can't have MPs judging other MPs. It doesn't work, it doesn't breed confidence. So we absolutely, both in the new procedure and in the old one that we've now got to look at as well, we've got to get rid of any sense that this is MPs marking their own homework. And
did you feel today that there was the appetite to actually recognise that and change it?
Not to the degree that I would like to have seen. Certainly some MPs get that, definitely, across the House, some MPs do. But the fact that the Leader of the House could be proposing yet another process that is not in itself independent, this House of Commons Commission looking at cases, I think indicates that there's still a lack of understanding that we cannot have MPs judging, making those key decisions on their fellow MPs.
I mean, that is mirrored in a sense by the situation today, which was John Bercow himself presiding over and calling on you, in all fairness, to make the urgent question. Is that the sticking point, that actually, while you've got, you know, the judge and juror, as it were, in the same place, you can't ever get to the bottom of this?
Well, I think the position of John Bercow today was slightly different in the sense that we weren't talking about live complaints that are current under existing guidelines being discussed. This was about a structural issue, a systemic issue. And to be fair to him, he's been very good at calling urgent questions, allowing MPs
to say
scrutiny.
Something publicly about the allegations about himself?
I think it would clear the air if he did, but on the other hand, you know, there has to be an investigation, doesn't there? And at the moment we have only had allegations from one side, they've been refuted. So what we need to do is have that investigation. But crucially, it cannot and must not be an investigation that is undertaken by MPs. That can have absolutely no credibility with the staff whatsoever.
I wonder if you think that there is a need or an appetite to get to the bottom of this, or whether there is a little bit of politicking going on, particularly concerning the Speaker's job, who, let's be honest, has made a lot of enemies in that job.
It's clear that some people are using this for their own political ends. And when you had an MP, James Duddridge, getting up to criticise John Bercow for presiding over the session today, that MP is someone who has had absolutely no love for John Bercow for many years. So, yes, people are using this to settle old scores. And that's disappointing to see, quite frankly, because what's at stake here is the well-being of staff who work hugely long hours, day in, day out, for MPs. And so we need to tackle the culture, this underlying culture of privilege, which allows MPs to think that they can act in ways that would simply not be acceptable in any other workplace. Parliament should be the beacon of best practice rather than constantly running to keep up.
Caroline Lucas, thank you.
Thank you.
Order. Urgent question. Caroline Lucas.
Speaker, to ask the Leader of the House about the treatment of House of Commons staff.
The Leader of the House. Andrea Leadsom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for her question. She and I worked together on the cross-party working group on an independent complaints and grievance policy, and I thank her sincerely for her work on it. Reports of bullying of House staff are of huge concern to me and to honourable members right across the House. I'm committed to stamping out all kinds of bullying and harassment in Parliament, in order to create an environment in which everyone feels safe and is treated with the respect and dignity that they deserve. We can only achieve our goals in this House with the support of others. A great debt of gratitude is owed by us all to the House staff who support us behind the scenes. I myself have worked with a large number of civil servants and staff of the House during my time in Parliament, from the clerks of the Treasury Select Committee to my private offices at the Treasury, in Energy and DEFRA, and now to the team in the Leader's Office and the excellent secretariat that supported the working group. I have always been impressed, and I'm very grateful for the dedication, professionalism, high standards and courtesy that all the civil servants and House staff have shown. I know that many honourable and right honourable members across the House and in the other place would say the same. The House will be aware that significant progress has been made in recent months, following the shocking reports at the end of last year of sexual harassment, bullying and intimidation in this place. The working group that I chaired, set up by the Prime Minister, has now published its report, and it has been agreed by both Houses. The work streams are now in place to get the new independent complaints procedure up and running within the next 3 months. The Honourable Lady will recall that the working group wanted House staff to be included in the new complaints procedure from day one. However, following evidence taken and in consultation with the trade union representatives of House staff, it was agreed that the staff of the House would not immediately be covered by the new independent procedure because they were already covered by the House's own respect policy. It was believed that the respect policy was working well and that House staff were satisfied with it. However, it was acknowledged during the working group evidence sessions that the respect policy did not cover complaints of sexual harassment and violence, and the aspiration of the working group is to take up the question of whether House staff should have immediate access to the new independent complaints procedure now that the report has been agreed by both Houses. And following the Newsnight allegations and others, it is clear that the respect policy may not be sufficient to protect House staff. I'm aware that today the Clerk of the House of Commons has written to House staff saying that there are clearly unresolved issues over bullying and harassment, including sexual harassment, which need to be addressed, and this will include a review of the respect policy. The Clerk of the House of Commons has also reassured staff who wish to come forward with complaints of bullying that they will be dealt with in the proper manner with the support of their managers and colleagues. It is right that everyone working for or with Parliament, regardless of position or seniority, should have the same rights and protections and should be held to the same high standards. The House Commission next meets on Monday the 19th of March, next Monday, and I have given notice to my fellow members that I will be recommending a short, independently led inquiry by the House Commission looking into allegations of systemic bullying of parliamentary staff. I will propose that the inquiry should hear from past and current staff members about their experiences and help to provide them with closure wherever possible. I will also propose that it should take soundings from current and former House staff on whether the respect policy is fit for purpose and whether House staff would be better served by having access to the new independent complaints and grievance policy from day one. Mr. Speaker, I am more determined than ever that we banish all kinds of harassment and bullying from this place, because make no mistake, there is a need for change.
Caroline Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for granting this urgent cross-party question. This isn't about party politics and it's not about political gain. It's about doing the right thing by the staff who support us on a daily basis and ensuring that the House of Commons leads by example when it comes to robustly tackling workplace bullying and sexual misconduct. Members and the public will have been shocked by the revelations of bullying at Westminster that were highlighted by Newsnight last week. I commend the Leader of the House for her ongoing work to establish an independent complaints and grievance procedure, and the need for that arose in part because the 2014 respect policy did not apply to large numbers of those working in Parliament. There are now considerable grounds to assert that that same respect policy does not have the confidence of the staff it is intended to protect, and that the new independent procedure must immediately be expanded to avoid a two-tier system. So I'm grateful to the Leader of the House that she broadly agrees with that, and I'm pleased to hear about a new short inquiry. But will she also confirm very specifically that there will be a presumption in favour of historic allegations being thoroughly investigated should those affected choose to make formal complaints, either under the Respect policy or the new procedure? Will she acknowledge that the positive work that she has led to date risks being undermined if we continue to allow sanctions to be determined by a committee on which MPs effectively hold all the power? Will she agree that the whole process, including sanctions, must be handled by an independent body? Will she revisit whether good employer and consent training, as an important part of culture change, should start before the next election? I think the evidence is clear that it should. And in the meantime, can she assure staff that any further complaints will be treated with the seriousness and respect which they deserve and will not be dismissed, as they were last Friday, as grotesque exaggeration?
The Leader of the House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I've already mentioned, I certainly agree with the Honourable Lady, and it was the aspiration of the working group to cover all staff working here in Parliament, including staff of the House, in our independent complaints procedure from day one. And I share her concern that we should now take steps to ensure that that does become the case as soon as that independent policy is up and running, which we intend to be within 3 months from now. With regards to her point about historic allegations, again, she will recall that the working group made clear we will deal with historic allegations, and it will be a matter for the detailed policies and procedures of the new working group to establish how exactly that can be done. I think what the Clerk of the House of Commons has made clear today is that he will be looking to provide that reassurance to House staff that any historic allegations will be properly dealt with in the future. She mentioned sanctions, that those must be independent. That has been a core part of the work of the working group. We are now looking very carefully and closely at how that impacts on the work of the Independent Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards and the Standards Committee itself, where there are both parliamentary members and lay members, and that work is ongoing. And in fact, later today I'm looking forward to meeting with the Standards Committee to have exactly the start of those discussions. She mentions consent training. Again, in the working group, we were very clear that consent training should be something that all people, not only who employ staff in this place, but who come into contact with other people, should be very clear about what constitutes consent and precisely what doesn't. And I can assure the Honourable Lady, I'm very keen to provide the carrot that ensures people want to take up that training. But as we agreed in the working group, we didn't have the levers at that time to make it compulsory. And then finally, I totally share her desire to see all staff here treated with the dignity and respect that everybody in this place deserves.
Mark Harper.
Grateful, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome what the Leader of the House said about her short inquiry? It seems to me that a good test for her to adopt is to make sure that this House does what all organisations should do, which is to make sure that everybody that works here, whether they work for members of Parliament or they work for the House, have the same processes and can expect to be treated to the same high standards, whoever they work for. And I urge her to bring that measure in as soon as she possibly can.
Leader of the House.
Well, I completely agree with my right honourable friend, and I can assure him and all honourable members that that is the aspiration of the working group, and it is my personal goal.
Valerie Vaz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it is noted that you actually have granted the urgent question, even though you are one of the people mentioned in media reports. But no one, critics or otherwise, can deny your commitment to accountability and transparency and attempts to move the House forward, recognising diversity and modern customs and practice. Mr. Speaker, the opposition take all allegations seriously, and we want a workplace that accommodates and supports everyone. I don't want to comment on individual cases. It is a matter for House authorities. But I want to ask the Leader of the House, is she aware of any formal complaints that have been instigated on the basis of those cases that have been reported? And if so, when? I note that she has suggested an inquiry. I'm very pleased that we can have this discussion at the Commission, and we look forward to that. Mr. Speaker, some cases predate the respect policy, And I know that as a result of the work streams following the report of the working group into sexual harassment and bullying, that too is being amended, and that there will be a new behaviour code and procedure that covers everyone working on the estate and in our constituencies. It is imperative that all staff working here feel that they can raise any complaints and grievances immediately. Can the Leader of the House confirm that she will agree to the President of the staff side attending the steering group, which I previously requested, and support? The working group published its report on the 8th of February 2018. The steering group is monitoring the work that will be carried out, and I am pleased that there is now a permanent secretariat. And the further work set out in the report that needs to be done is being progressed to ensure that complaints and grievance policy that will be put into place is fair and robust. It is only when that is tested will we know if they work. There will be a continual process to refine them so that they are effective, so everyone has confidence in them. Can the Leader of the House say, and she has touched on the figure of 3 months, but we need to balance speed with making sure that there is an effective process, whether this work will be completed by the 3 months or at least by summer, at least before the House rises. Mr. Speaker, the opposition Labour Party takes all complaints on sexual harassment and abuse and discrimination extremely seriously, so that anyone with a complaint comes forward so that all allegations can be fully investigated and any appropriate disciplinary action taken in line with the party's procedures. All of us have the absolute utmost respect for the House clerks, and any of us who've had dealings with them on the various select committees, as I have, know that they are experts in their field and they offer vital assistance and advice to everyone. But I know that everyone who works here, in whatever capacity, knows that they play a vital role in ensuring that our Parliament and our democracy thrives.
Leader of the House.
Well, I thank the Shadow Leader of the House for her remarks, and also am grateful to her for the part she played in the working group on setting up an independent complaints procedure. I think it was notable, Mr. Speaker, that there was unanimous support for establishing that independent complaints procedure that I think the whole House can be very pleased about. In regard to her specific questions, she asks whether I'm aware of specific formal complaints. It was not in the terms of reference of the working group, and in fact it was specifically excluded from the terms of reference of the working group to consider specific complaints. In my role as Leader of the Commons, I have had a number of people come forward to me, and I have sought to deal as I can, wherever possible, with complaints that have been brought to me, but I don't propose to discuss any specific allegations in the Chamber. She asks about a review of the respect policy for House staff, and I can say to her that reading from the letter of the Clerk of the House to House staff today, he says, there are unresolved issues over bullying and harassment, including sexual harassment, which need to be addressed. And the Clerk of the House goes on to say that we will revisit and renew the respect policy. She asks whether the House authorities' trades union representative will be invited to join the steering group, and I can assure her that that, I believe, has already happened. He has been invited to join the steering group. And she asks when will the finalised procedures be finished. We have set an aspiration at the first meeting of the steering group last week that the bulk of it is done within 3 months, and there will be a final vote in this House on changes necessary to standing orders and to adopt the behaviour code, and we certainly expect and hope that that will be before the House rises for summer recess.
James Duddridge.
Is it appropriate for Mr. Speaker to remain in his place where there are allegations against him which he is trying to suppress using taxpayer-funded money through sending out letters through Speaker's Council?
Shame on you. The Leader of the House.
I think it's absolutely vital that all colleagues join together in supporting the efforts being made by this House to stamp out all bullying and harassment wherever we see it, and to ensure that everybody will be treated in the future with the respect and dignity that they deserve.
Pete Wishart.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Can I heartily congratulate the Honourable Lady for securing this very important urgent question. She, like me, will find some of the issues that have been raised by BBC Newsnight over the weekend depressingly familiar and something that comes as little surprise to any of us who have listened to the evidence that we secured as part of the harassment working group. It was only really a matter of time that issues such as this would emerge, and it's quite surprising it's been so short. This endemic culture is something that has to be tackled, and I very much support the Leader of the House's call for an independent inquiry. And perhaps you could talk just a little bit how she says this will be conducted. Does the Leader of the House agree that historical allegations must be considered? And does she support the view that we would be letting down victims past and present if we fail to respond to such allegations? Does she agree that this is all just part of the normalisation of bullying and harassment that continues to poison our politics, amplified by this archaic environment of grandeur and subservience in which we conduct our roles as members of Parliament? And lastly, will she ensure that all members, whether they work for this House or whether they work for members of Parliament, all members of staff are covered by the new behaviour code and have access to the new complaints procedure as quickly as possible?
Leader of the House.
Well, first I'd like to pay tribute to the Honourable Gentleman for his part in the working group. He was assiduously attending meetings and taking a full part in the work, and I'm grateful to him for his contribution. He asks how will an independent inquiry be conducted. Obviously, my intention is to make this proposal to the House Commission. It will be a matter for the Commission to agree whether to do that or not. The House Commission is made up of a number of members from across the House, including one from his own party. However, I would like to see it carried out by an independent individual who can hear from past and current members of the staff of the House, so that that person can be free of any input from either employers or indeed parliamentarians, and people can feel they can come forward in confidence. I completely agree with him. It would be letting people down if we fail to deal with this, and it's absolutely vital that those who have past allegations, who feel that the time has passed for them to be dealt with seriously, can achieve some closure by being able to come forward and be heard in that way. And I also do agree with him that it is demeaning to this House and to all of us if we fail to get a grip on it, and that's why this House has shown such commitment to setting up an independent complaints and grievance policy, which is the right way forward.
Michael Fabricant.
I very much welcome the Leader's statement. And does she agree with me that sometimes the accused can be victims too? And that's why it is so important that we have an independent inquiry. But would she also agree with me that the House of Commons Commission would not be an independent judge or jury, and indeed would not be seen to be as such, simply because of the very membership of that commission, and that it does need to be an independent individual or group of individuals?
The Leader of the House.
Well, of course, my honourable friend raises an important point, and during the working group evidence sessions, we were very conscious that it's important to protect both complainants, who are at the heart of the independent complaints procedure, but also the alleged perpetrator. It is important that justice is seen to be done and that all parties are properly supported. He's also right to say that an inquiry led by the House Commission couldn't be independent, which is why my recommendation to the House Commission will be that it should be an independently led inquiry into allegations of bullying.
Alison McGovern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I say to the Leader of the House that when she chooses, as she has done today, to focus on the thoroughness and decency of the process of dealing with these issues, she will get support from right across this House. And she has mentioned several times the involvement of trade union representatives. So would she just join me in asserting that it is right that members of our staff and members of staff of this House are members of trade unions if they choose to be, and that their representatives ought to be involved at every stage of these processes?
Leader of the House.
Well, the Honourable Lady gives me the opportunity to thank and pay tribute to the very good staff representatives who were on the working group. A representative from Unite, who is working as a researcher for a member of the Labour Party, the representative of MAPSA, the Members and Peers Staff Association, who works as a researcher for a member of the Conservative Party, and a representative of the NUJ, who works for the Scottish Nationalists here. They all made a great contribution and I think are to be commended for their efforts.
Andrew Bridgen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does my right honourable friend agree? Unfortunately, the system we've got at the moment is that House of Commons staff believe that if they make a complaint about bullying and harassment, it won't be taken seriously, and secondly, and perhaps more insidiously, believe that it will be seriously detrimental to their future career. I welcome the fact that we're going to have an independent investigation into the allegations we heard on Newsnight. When will that start and when will it complete?
The Leader of the House.
The House Commission meets next Monday. I will be making that recommendation there, and then that will start as soon as possible.
Alistair Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The House is exceptionally well served by the clerk staff. I think that's a matter of common accord. So surely I hope it goes without saying that these complaints require to be investigated with rigour in a comprehensive way and independently. Mr. Speaker, when you and I first entered the House was almost entirely self-regulating. The position today is very, very different, but that change has come in a way that is piecemeal. What surely now is required is a proper, comprehensive look again at the question of parliamentary privilege and self-regulation. So can I say, in welcoming the short independent inquiry that the Leader seeks to establish, that once that is done, she should apply her mind to revisiting the work of the joint committee set up in 1998 to look at the question of the extent and definition of parliamentary privilege.
The Leader of the House.
I think the right honourable gentleman makes a very interesting observation, and I will certainly look at it.
Dr. Matthew Offord.
Does the Leader of the House agree with me that every single individual complaint made against a member actually reflects badly on each and every one of us in this place? And given the Newsnight allegation that the policy simply was not up to scratch and certainly was something that we decided amongst ourselves, does she agree with me that we not only need an independent investigation, but we also need an external independent body to establish our policy going forward?
Leader of the House.
Well, I hope I can reassure my honourable friend that the independent grievance policy that we are in the process of establishing will ensure that the culture in this place changes to the benefit of all who work here. But I would also just like to say at this point that many honourable members are very troubled by these allegations. It is, as ever, a small minority of people who behave badly, and he is right to point out that it demeans all of us when a few of us behave badly.
Mr. Barry Shearman.
Mr. Speaker, having been in the House quite a long time, I recall in the early days that the warnings to particularly young women in this House was very often not just a certain small group of members of Parliament, but some senior clerks who were known to be bullies. And as chair of the anti-bullying group of MPs for some years, I've been fighting everyone's corner in that respect. And I have to say, in recent years, I've never known a speaker as strong in terms of reforming that particular part of our lives. But can I urge her to get on with this quickly? We want justice to be seen and to be done. But I also want this committee to know there are only a tiny minority of members of this House have used this almost like a new kind of McCarthyism, to name someone, that someone is put into purdah on that side or this side with no redress, dreadful things happening to their families, and one doesn't even know what happens to the families and the members who are accused. There is a danger of a kind of political McCarthyism that we've also got to stamp out in this place.
So again, I would remind the honourable gentleman that the independent complaints procedure will be exactly that. It will be independent, it will be confidential, so that complainants who very often don't want to come forward for fear of being having to then deal with the person they're accusing, so they will come forward in confidence. The alleged perpetrator will also be able to have their side of the story heard in confidence. There will therefore be natural justice rules applied to the entire process, but there will also be very serious sanctions for wrongdoing. I genuinely believe that this work will change the culture in Parliament. It will take us to a new stage where people can come forward, and it will make people think twice about some of their attitudes.
Philip Hollowbone.
Chair, there may be problems with definition. Lots of these cases won't have been investigated, and often at best the details will be sketchy at this stage. But can the Leader of the House give the House an indication of the scale of this issue? How many cases of abuse of House or members' staff have been brought to her attention in her recent dealings with this issue?
I don't really think I can give my honourable friend an idea of the scale of the problem. I think, like all honourable members, different cases appear in the media, and it is very difficult to understand exactly the enormity and range of the problem. But suffice to say that going forward, I think across this House we're determined to see change for the better.
Chris Leslie.
The Leader of the House's emphasis that she's placed on due process and principles of justice. Complainants have to be taken seriously, but then the person who is being complained against also has rights, and the case should be heard on the basis of evidence. I think that is really important in this whole process. Could she also say a word about the Independent Commissioner for Parliamentary Standards that we currently have, who of course hears complaints about honourable members, can then put those to the Parliamentary Standards and Privileges Committee? That is also a route that I think needs to be somehow incorporated into the new process that she's envisaging.
Well, the honourable gentleman is exactly right, and indeed that is a part of the process. So, very specifically, an independent complaint is heard in confidence, and then if there is a finding against the alleged perpetrator, that would then, in the case of a Member of Parliament being complained about, go to the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards, who would either carry out an appeal and look at the evidence again, or find against the member, or find that there was no cause to answer, and then she will have expanded sanctions at a lower level, or indeed she will pass it on to the Committee for Standards for them to consider, including recommending suspension to this House, which could lead to the recall of Parliament, of Members of Parliament Act of 2015 being invoked.
Dr. Julian Lewis.
Does the Leader of the House agree that any member of staff who feels that he or she has been bullied must have an absolute guarantee that their career will not suffer in any way if they make a complaint? And if they have that guarantee, does she agree that the reputation of members of Parliament should not be sullied by accusations that they are bullies unless a complaint against them has actually been made?
Yes, I think my honourable friend sums it up very well. It's vital that complainants are protected so they can come forward in confidence and not be further victimised. But it's also essential that people who are complained about have the opportunity to put their side of the story and to receive proper justice.
Lucy Powell.
Mr. Speaker, can I commend the Leader of the House and her counterparts, and indeed you as well, Mr. Speaker, on your response to these issues so far. Does the Leader of the House agree with me that this is a moment for each and every one of us to reflect on our behaviour and to constantly reflect on our behaviour? Because it's not about what we judge to deem the appropriate behaviour, but how we make others feel is the critical issue. And that's why the independent nature of her proposals is so critical, because this has to be without political fear or favour or political campaigns against opponents or anybody else, so that people can come forward in that regard.
Yes, she's exactly right. The power dynamic, the idea that how you behave is not necessarily how you are seen to behave, is incredibly important in this, and certainly in the working group evidence we took a lot of witness statements about exactly that, and it's vital that we take that into account.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Due process sometimes takes a very long time. Could I ask the Leader of the House to ensure that due process should be as speedy as possible in the interests of everyone?
I completely agree with my honourable friend, and I think we're quite proud that we moved very quickly with the independent complaints procedure, but at the same time we're doing a thorough job, and that is our plan.
John Mann.
The industrial tribunal has to be registered under the Ministry of Justice. In the interest of transparency, will the Leader of the House publish all industrial tribunal applications that have been registered against members of Parliament or indeed against the House of Commons?
I don't believe that that would be a matter for me, but I will certainly look into it.
Stella Creasy.
Mr. Speaker, can I put on record my support for the work that the Leader of the House and the Speaker and all the members of the Workers' Group have been doing since November on this issue? And does she agree with me that we need to take the politics out of this altogether? If people are to have confidence that we truly are listening, that victims will be believed and that we will have a proper process, then it's time for professionals, not the press or political expediency, to lead this process.
Yes, I completely agree with the Honourable Lady. The independence is absolutely vital.
Paul Farrelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I can assure you I've got great respect for all staff I work with. But I was also the guinea pig in 2012 after a difficult phone hacking report for the original respect policy. I was flayed by selective leaking then, 6 years ago, and it's just happened again now. So I would ask the Leader of the House and honourable members, before they jump to judgment after what was a very one-sided selective BBC broadcast, that they approach the cases that have been raised in a more balanced way, and that they also consider the reasons why the original respect policy was scrapped in the first place as not fit for purpose, that they also give consideration to the disparity of support of MPs who are complained against, especially when complainants have the backing of the resourceful and very well-resourced First Division Association in particular. And perhaps, finally, Mr. Speaker, I might say, ask the House to consider why historical old allegations like this are being selectively recycled now, and by whom, because whatever is at play, this is not a game for reputations or families.
The House.
Well, what I would say to the honourable gentleman is that the advantage of an independent complaints procedure is that it exists and will exist for people to be able to come forward with confidence and with confidentiality. And what that means is they at long last do have somewhere they can go and make their complaint without just going straight to the press, which, as he raises, has caused some difficulties.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The working group report recommends training by the end of this Parliament. Clearly, that's inappropriate. Will the Leader bring that forward to ensure that every member and manager has face-to-face training within this year?
Well, the Honourable Lady is not quite right. The working group proposes that training is essential for all members across the House in a wide variety of areas, and there are measures being brought forward to encourage people to undertake training, and what we have said is that in their induction, new members in the next Parliament will receive compulsory training in certain areas.
Mr. Speaker, could the Leader of the House just clarify that if a member of a House of Commons staff member raises a complaint either today or the next few days, what policy or procedure would that complaint be dealt with?
So currently, members of House staff who are complaining about allegations of bullying or inappropriate behaviour will come under the House Respect Policy, which was established a few years back. What the working group is doing is creating an independent complaints procedure. The House staff were not going to be subject or able to take advantage of the independent complaints procedure, and it's that we now want to look at again.
Stephen Doughty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have huge respect for the staff of this House, where they work in our catering department, all the clerks' department. My experiences have been absolutely excellent. But can I add my voice to those who are calling for absolute due process in this? We need to respect the rights of the complainant and the complained against, and it's the only way to deal with allegations of this nature. Would the Leader of the House join me in issuing a word of caution to members of this House about conducting these matters in the media, whether off the record or on the record, not least because that might prejudice any process, law less give the impression that it is politicised or personalised in the way that they're approaching it?
Well, what I can say to the honourable gentleman is that the working group put the complainant at the heart of this procedure, and what was very clear from the evidence we took is that people will only come forward if they feel they will be treated in confidence and that they then won't be blasted all over the front of the newspapers.
Yasmin Qureshi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Bullying and harassment occur in all walks of life and in all professions. What's important is the person is listened to, the matter is investigated independently. But, and I say this very strongly, we must also remember the golden thread that runs between our English law, which is you are innocent until proven guilty.
Yes, and the laws of natural justice have certainly been applied to the new independent complaints procedure.
Liz McInnes.
When I was a Unite rep in the NHS, I represented members on both sides of bullying and harassment cases, but one thing that would have made my job as a workplace rep very difficult would be if there was a two-tier system in operation. Exactly. So can the Leader of the House assure us that she will move towards a single system, a robust policy and equal trade union recognition for everyone who works in this House?
Well, I can certainly tell the Honourable Lady that it was the ambition of the working group that all those who work here would have access to the independent complaints procedure. And as I've said to other honourable members, it is our intention to look at that again.
Chris Bryant.
Even today, the vast majority of LGBT students in school will at some point or other in their school career face horrific instances of bullying, which is why they are 6 times more likely than their straight counterparts to take their own lives. Many schools have said, oh, let's build a tolerant school, but actually sometimes to homosexuals that feels as if we're being tolerated, we're being put up with. Isn't the key word respect? Respect for one another, whatever our political views, whatever our gender, whatever religious views we have, or any part of our background. And the only way we're going to be able to change that culture in here is if we make sure that every single one of us is fully and properly trained, not only the first time we come into this House, but every time we are returned by our voters.
I do agree with him. Respect is key, and that's what we're determined to achieve, is a workplace environment in Parliament that is amongst the best in the world, that treats everybody with the respect and dignity that they deserve.
Mr. Speaker, we've known each other, Mr. Speaker, for long before either of us were elected here, and we've had, I think it's fair to say, strong and heated disagreements about lots of issues over the years. So I certainly couldn't be described as a cheerleader by any means, but I do think in all of this there's got to be a fair and proper process. It can't be based on anonymous briefings to the press, it can't be based on political disagreements, and it can't be based on score settling either.
Again, I would say to the honourable gentleman that the whole purpose of an independent complaints and grievance policy is to ensure that there is justice for the complainant and also for the person alleged to have carried out the wrongdoing.
Thank you. Order.